Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's Resistance Live for Monday, February 10th, 2025. I am ECM, as you all know, and I'm glad you're here. We have to talk about very dire predictions today. I spent some time yesterday for our Patreon subscribers over on the Patreon feed on our weekly progressive coffee hour, which is for Patreon subscribers only. You can head on over there if you want to join us next weekend. One of the things that we talked about yesterday and that is front and center today is the issue of the survival of the rule of law. And I have thoughts and some things to share. And even though we talked about it a little bit yesterday in Progressive Coffee Hour, we're also going to talk about it a little bit here today because it is dire times. And I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat it. There's a lot going on right now that raises really serious questions about where we're headed. Which does not mean all hope is lost. So stay tuned. All right. First things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a black silk blouse with a chocolate covered cardigan sweater over top. My hair is pulled back. I'm a pink skin, green eyed, dirty blonde haired woman. And I have my thick gold hoops in. I'm in front of a bookshelf and my yellow utility cart and a big cushy chair in my office. I'm coming to you as always from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. Okay. So Saturday morning, we had an order drop that essentially required Elon Musk and his lackeys to get out entirely of the Department of Treasury payment system. And on top of that, they were required to immediately destroy any copies of any materials that they had downloaded out of that system. This was an emergency temporary restraining order that was entered by a judge who held a hearing on Friday afternoon. The judge was appointed by a Democratic president, which doesn't matter. This is one thing that has really started to bother me about the way in which these are being received. The whole reason why judicial appointments are supposed to be lifetime appointments and why we don't elect judges in the federal judiciary is because the assumption is that they should be applying the rule of law so that it applies fairly to everyone. Now, we all know that our judicial system is inherently tagged by white supremacy and patriarchy and all sorts of other isms, because everything in America is. And yet, the idea behind this is that the law should be applied freely and fairly to everyone in the same manner, okay? What happened shortly thereafter was that both Elon Musk and JD Vance took to their respective accounts on social media and made noises about the fact that if judges ruled in ways that they didn't like, those judges should be impeached. Or that if the judges, as JD Vance put it, issue orders that, in his view, are outside the scope of what judges are supposed to do. I mean, JD Vance essentially this weekend argued for the end of the separation of powers and co-equal checks and balances in our respective branches of government. He suggested that, those orders could just kind of be ignored, right? Judges should be impeached. Elon Musk said, basically, if orders are out there that don't go our way, what choice do we have but to defy the rule of law? Okay, so that's not how any of this works. Liz Cheney herself slapped back at JD Vance over the weekend saying, the whole point of this is that if you don't like an order, you can appeal it. If you ignore the order and ignore the rule of law, that's tyranny. And you know what? She's right. I don't want to sugarcoat it. If they start ignoring orders and just doing whatever the hell they want, that just cements the idea that we are living through a coup, which many of you know I have already taken that position, and I'm not alone in it. The larger issue here, however, is about enforcement. So I want to explain how this works so people can understand what's going on. And I know many of you have seen both an interview that George Conway gave on The Bulwark a few days ago addressing this issue and an interview that he gave this morning on Morning Joe. Okay. And I, of course, approach this through the lens, not just of being a lawyer, but also through the lens of having organized mass mobilizations many times. And so one of the things that I want people to consider here is that while there are a lot of things that lawyers and commentators are right about, there's other things that are not really being accounted for in the discourse and the way that this is being discussed. But let's talk about the legal components of this first. Okay. So the legal system is set up in such a way that in civil proceedings, because I'm going to remind you, all of these cases that have been filed against the administration are civil proceedings. No one is being criminally prosecuted yet. And again, we've talked a little bit about how that's not likely to happen, at least in our federal system. Reminder, there's two pillars to the pyramid of the American legal system, federal and state, right? In the federal system, it's very unlikely that anybody's going to be prosecuted for this multitude of crimes unless and until Trump is out of office, because the DOJ is under the control of Donald Trump. And we all know that he's weaponized it already against people that he doesn't like. And that also means that the likelihood that Pam Bondi is going to allow DOJ lawyers and U.S. attorneys to prosecute Elon Musk and his lackeys is extremely slim. Okay. So these civil cases that have been filed against the administration are essentially seeking what's called injunctive relief. That is relief that is based in action, not in money damages. Okay. They are asking the court to order certain things to happen or not happen. It is action-based relief. All right. So ordering Elon Musk and his troop of Nazi youth to get out of the Treasury Department payment system is injunctive relief. In this case, it's what's called a temporary restraining order. A permanent injunction can be entered down the road, but right now we are in TRO territory, temporary restraining order territory. Now you may wonder, what happens in the average civil case if someone defies a temporary restraining order? Well, the other party can bring that before the court. There's at least one of the 35 plus cases that have already been filed against the administration where enforcement has been requested. Okay. The way that this works is the other party says they're violating the order. They're actually still messing around in the payment system. They haven't deleted things that you instructed them to delete. And we know that because somebody's leaked it or somebody's seen them or somebody knows that they're still inside the payment system. Other people have reported it to us. Here's an affidavit swearing under oath that, Elon Musk's Nazi Youth Brigade is still messing around with the code. Okay. They can bring that before a judge, and a judge will evaluate whether or not it rises to the level of what's referred to as criminal contempt. Now, there's a little bit of a misnomer here because criminal contempt is actually not considered to be a crime. Okay. It is actually a civil remedy available to judges to enforce their orders. All right. And what it ordinarily means is that a judge will evaluate the evidence and then figure out how to enforce the order and or hold the person in contempt. Contempt can be anything from a fine to up to 6 months in jail for every violation of the order. Every violation. Okay. Now, in an ordinarily functioning democracy, if a judge ruled that a party had violated an order and criminal contempt had been found and that jail was the sentence that was going to be applied, it's not really a sentence, it's more of a penalty, but the penalty that was going to be applied, a warrant would be issued for that person's arrest. Okay, and that would be executed upon by the U.S. Marshals Service, also known as the USMS. Okay. The problem we have here is that the U.S. Marshals Service is a division of the Department of Justice. And so the question that is being raised by George and others at this point is what happens if Pam Bondi simply instructs the U.S. Marshals Service that they are not actually to follow through on the order from the judge to arrest Elon Musk. Now, this raises a whole host of concerns because technically that would be an illegal order. It would be an order to defy a legitimate order of the court, to break the law and to break their oaths to the Constitution, and instead to follow what Pam Bondi tells them they should do. Now, I'm going to remind everybody that within days of Trump's election in November, the Department of Defense, different department, but relevant comparator, started having informal meetings about what to do in the event that Donald Trump executed an illegal order to the military. And while we don't have direct reporting on this, it's a pretty safe assumption that inside the Department of Defense, they've got a plan in the event that Trump issues an illegal order. Okay. What we don't have an understanding about here is what would happen in the event that Trump said, don't arrest Elon Musk. And the U.S. Marshals Service was told by Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, that was the order, right? That would be an illegal order. It would be an order to defy a legitimate order of the federal courts. What George is envisioning, and which, I happen to agree is not out of the realm of possibility, is that if the U.S. Marshals Service got an order like that and simply declined to arrest Elon Musk for contempt, essentially all bets would be off in terms of the ability to enforce the law against what Musk and his lackeys are doing, or for that matter, anyone else in the administration. And that raises a very dangerous specter, because if there is no means to apply the rule of law effectively to Elon, anybody else in the administration who's running roughshod across democracy and destroying the federal government, all bets are off, right? they can essentially do whatever they want. Now, I will tell you that unlike George, I don't think it's a completely foregone conclusion that the U.S. Marshal Service would simply take that order and abide by it. Oh no, we're going to ignore the court's order, right? Because that, by the way, could lead to an escalation in the judges' chambers about who they're going to hold in contempt. So there are stages between like ignoring the order, an order to not arrest someone for defying the order, and then the complete devolution of the rule of law in America. Okay, it's not that simple. Now, I understand why George is worried. And I actually don't disagree with him on the point either that we could be mere weeks away from that. But all that said, there are glitches in the system right now about how this is going to work. And we don't actually know how this is all going to play out. Now, in George's interview in The Bulwark, which I had a chance to watch late last night, and again this morning, he is talking about the need for people to be in the streets. All right. And I will tell you all that one thing that I want to keep coming back to here that I think everybody needs to think about is that, and this is very true, by the way, in terms of polling and everything else. Okay. The vast majority of US citizens did not vote for Donald Trump. Okay, they didn't vote for Trump. And that's if you include the people who didn't vote at all and the people who voted for Harris. Okay. We're talking about, honestly, a fraction, like less than a third of the American voting public that voted for Donald Trump. So there's no question that there's like way more people who could be mobilized against what's happening than people who are for it. And that's not even accounting for all the people who are currently having regrets. There's 2 pieces in the Wall Street Journal, actually, about how industry and bankers are now like really starting to regret their support of Donald Trump, in part because, you know, he randomly announced yesterday on Air Force One that there's going to be 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, which is essentially the end of the automobile and the construction industry in the United States, among many other things. But one of the things that I want people to think about here is that even with those kind of numbers, people have to be organized, right? And that's not even accounting for the fact that there are people who are currently really disengaged. So one of the solutions to where we are now is something that I have been advocating for a very long time, like literally since the day after the election, which is essentially that people get involved where they live in organizations on the ground. That can be Indivisible. It can be Red, Wine, and Blue. It can be your local immigration rights advocacy organization. It can be your local LGBTQ plus center. Okay. These are just a few examples. Your local abortion fund is another one. Your local UU church, they're very justice oriented and very well organized on issues like climate. That's another option. You need to look around and see what's happening where you live, what's nearby, if it's not in your direct town. And you need to get involved and start participating, even if that means just like hopping on a weekly call. Because part of what is happening now is that the structures that have been supporting people behind the scenes are now becoming ever more important in the context of collective organizing. All right. And we are some steps away from like the total end of the US government. And Norm Eisen, who is like actively litigating, former ambassador, actively litigating right now against the Trump administration in like 5 cases, has also been talking over the weekend about the fact that we know from the work about fascism from Timothy Snyder and others that we have to defend institutions. We have to continue to chase down the rule of law. We have to continue to try to hold their feet to the fire. And that litigation does matter. And judges do have other things available to them, right? You know, there are various ways in which I can see, for instance, a judge enforcing something against the U.S. Marshals Service in the event that the USMS decides to not comply. But all that said, the most critical thing for all of us right now, especially if you're feeling scared and like all of this is beyond your control and like it's a terrifying time, and I'm not going to discount the fact that what we're living through is really scary. The most critical thing is to get into community with other people, because in addition to helping your other people out, you'll also be helping yourself. And so this is a moment where we've really got to become like organized and involved locally where we live. And it's one reason why I've been talking about things like mutual aid and dual power literally since November 6th. We have to actually do this now, because there may come a moment in the not too distant future where there's going to need to be kind of like nationwide organizing in ways that result in mass mobilizations, right? But also, and this is really critical, scary things are happening. And they're happening like on a regular basis. Like our Patreon feed this morning was filled with people who are logging into Social Security to make sure they're getting checks this week. one of the things that will help you in this is being engaged in mutual aid organizations where you live. So this is the moment, if you have not yet done it, this is one of your homework assignments for today, to find an organization where you live or near where you live and sign up for a call or a meeting. Go, attend it, listen to what they have to say and what they're doing. Because the thing that you're going to find out is there's a lot of things happening that you're not seeing on social media, more on that in a minute, to make sure that there is adequate, not just resources to keep people alive, but like resistance to what is happening in the event that, you know, it becomes really necessary for people to be engaged in mass mobilization. Okay. I want to just say one other thing about this, because I know it's a really scary time, right? And when you see things like JD Vance saying that he could just like chuck the law out the window if he doesn't like it, or that judges should be impeached, right, if they issue rulings that go against the Trump administration. One of the things that I just want to remind people of here is that doom scrolling right now is your enemy. And I've been hearing from a lot of people over the last few days that they have friends and family members who literally cannot put down the phone, who are so frozen in fear about what's happening that they're literally just like this all day long, not leaving the house, afraid to go outside, afraid to engage in their daily lives, completely discombobulated by what's taking place. So this is my moment to remind all of you of something really critical, okay? Social media platforms, particularly those owned by the oligarchs, are designed to make you upset. This is not an overstatement, okay? They particularly are engineered to get your attention through outrage and fear. And you can imagine, if you understand that this is the way that they work, Blue Sky being an exception, because there's no algorithm automatically feeding you stuff there other than like who you follow. If you understand that this is the way it works, spending time on Instagram or Threads or X or, you know, any of the other platforms that are owned by Meta, Facebook, is actually going to make your sense of where we are in the world worse. It is going to terrify you because that's what it's designed to do. And the news right now is kind of bad enough. So the thing that I want to encourage all of you to do right now, okay, if you know people in your life who are in this place, or you yourself are in this place, okay, is to advocate for putting the phone in a drawer, even if it's just for like 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day. Do what you can do. Reminder, there is a functionality of addiction to this. They are purposefully, you know, like engineering dopamine hits so that you keep going back to it. Set your phone aside. Go read a book, okay? Go hang out with your dog. Go for a walk in the park, okay? Do something that is not about engaging with like the terrorism of the news cycle. And you'll feel better. Like, you actually will feel better. Engage with people who love you. Get your neighbors who are friends and family members who are stuck in that space out of the house. Take them to the farmer's market. Take them out for coffee. Give people a moment to actually connect in real time, face to face with one another. It will make a huge difference. Because the other thing that I just want to remind people of is that the algorithms are not showing you the good stuff, okay? They're not focusing on the people in your community who have just fed 200 people through a food bank, right? You're not going to see on your socially engineered feed, your timeline, the people in your community who are out there making sure that migrants have access to legal services. You're not going to see that, right? They are engineered to make you feel like garbage. And in this environment where there's so much other bad stuff going on, engaging in it without any restrictions on yourself, without setting boundaries, without checking in on your friends and neighbors who are stuck in that place is really, really bad for everyone. Not only is it bad for our bodies and our mental health, but it's bad for organizing. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to in the last couple of weeks who are like, you know what? I was really feeling like trash. And then I went to a meeting for this local organization that's working on climate, or I was really feeling like garbage. And then I went out to lunch with a couple of friends who are in the same place. And we realized that there are things that we can do here locally that are really going to help people. So these strategies right now are not optional. Like, it's not very often that I say to you guys, like, you have to do this, but really in this environment, you do. You've got to be very conscious about the way that you're consuming information right now, or it's going to kind of take us all down. And for that reason, I want to remind everybody of something else that's really key here. And I said this last week, and I want to say it here again, okay? You do not have to consume everything, okay? I know a lot of us are in a really hypervigilant state right now where we're like, I have to be aware of every horrible thing that's coming so I can prepare and maybe think about how I protect myself. But that is actually also a recipe for disaster, okay? No one can control everything that is happening right now. We can control things that are happening where we live. We can control things that are happening in our own homes and with our own families, hopefully. I hope you're not living in an abusive situation. We can control the way in which we respond to these things and how we engage with them. But you do not need to know every horrible thing that's happening. Okay. You can come here every day for a summary and I'll give it to you. Okay. But you don't need to actually be deeply engaged in like 100% of the nonsense, right? Did anybody need to know that Donald Trump canceled minting of the penny yesterday? Who gives a shit, right? You don't need to worry about that. That's not basic information that anybody needs. It's going to help anybody. Who cares? So stay focused on 1 to 2 issues that you really care about. And, again, this can be like, what you're focused on with your local indivisible chapter, or if you're going to join Mom's Demand, it can be being focused on things like gun safety, right? You could decide you're going to focus your attention right now on how to make sure our trans siblings are safe. In that event, let's just take that as an example. You're going to want to follow Aaron Reed of Aaron in the Morning. You're going to want to follow Assigned Media, which is an entirely trans-run media platform. And you're going to want to stay abreast of all the horrific anti-trans things that are coming out of this administration. And you're also going to want to take action. But understand that, like, we really are in a place right now where you've got to pick the 1 to 2 things that you can do and map your bandwidth consistent with that, okay? It's very, very important at this point that we don't allow ourselves to participate in this flooding of the zone, because I'm going to remind you of something else. Somebody asked me for book recommendations today, right? And so, reminder, you can go read Timothy Snyder on tyranny. You should read Jason Stanley's book, How Fascism Works. There are various other folks that you can follow. Timothy Snyder has a great Substack, by the way. It's really funny and also really good, very of the moment. You can read Robert Reich. You can read Heather Cox Richardson, who I know many of you do. There are various people that you can follow to be educated about this. But one of the key features that I want to remind people of about the way fascism works is that they are purposefully trying to overwhelm us, right? They want us all in that fight or flight response so that we don't organize against them. This is not accidental. This is strategic on their part. And so, in fact, if you're like allowing yourself to be flooded because you're doom scrolling 24/7, you're kind of letting them win. Like, we have a choice to make here. Are we going to be nose down in our phones all day long, every day, freaking out? Or are we going to say, okay, that's enough for now. I'm setting that to the side and I'm actually going to do something. Whether that's like take care of myself, do something that relaxes me, read a book, or whether it's like I'm going to go to an event, or I'm going to jump on an organizing call, or I'm going to make a phone call to a local center that's doing work that I care about and ask how I can help. Okay? We have a choice to make about whether or not we let them do that to us. Okay? And again, this is a part of understanding the ways in which we have options to take back our power right now. All right? So that's the end of my little lecture on this today. But I do want to remind you all that, you have to be very cautious about how you're consuming information right now. Not just like what you're consuming in terms of disinformation, but also how. And it is very important to stay grounded, to not allow yourself to be overwhelmed, and to be very mindful of what's happening in your body when you're looking at all of this stuff. All right. Super critical. Okay. Other things that people should be aware of today that are key. The Consumer Finance Protection Board was essentially shut down by Trump on Saturday. They're pulling another version of USAID. There's already been litigation started about this, but the aim essentially is to eliminate the agency watchdog that was keeping consumers from being defrauded by financial institutions, okay? I think we can all see where they're going with this. They want to essentially eliminate the capacity to regulate financial crimes. Okay. And this is not surprising if you know anything about libertarianism, if you know anything about the way Elon Musk functions. He's very anti-regulation on all fronts. Again, there's court litigation going on about this. I want to remind everybody that not everything that they are doing is successful. Okay. I know it's only been a week, but we've all forgotten about the way in which the spending freeze was stopped simply by vocalizing outrage. Okay. We actually have had a win on this recently. Maybe not as much of a win as we wanted, but we've had a win. And again, this is a reminder that using your voice actually does make a difference here. So that's one thing that people should be aware of. Another thing that people should be aware of is that 50 people have apparently now been deported to Guantanamo Bay, and we do not know who they are. Now, there is a good development on this, which actually happened in the middle of the Super Bowl yesterday, which is that 3 Venezuelan migrants filed for an emergency temporary restraining order to prevent themselves from being deported to Guantanamo Bay. And that was immediately granted, like in the middle of the Super Bowl. So these random flights to Gitmo, where they're putting people on the plane and essentially they're disappearing them. Like, I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but we have no idea who the identities of these people are. And they're being moved to an offshore location where there's no monitoring. There's no ability to see who's going in and out, right? It sounds very much like a black ops site. And that should be something that worries all of us, okay? That said, again, this is something where the courts are playing a role in it and we can all play a role in it. And so you should be aware of it. It is very scary. And at the same time, that story is not over yet. Okay. The TRO is real. All right. I've already mentioned this issue of the tariffs. So I have to issue a little bit of a warning on this because, as you all will remember, one of the things that happened last week is that we went right up to the brink of these tariffs being imposed on Canada and Mexico. And then at the very last minute, Canada and Mexico kind of pulled one over on Trump. And Trump was like, ooh, you've given me what I wanted. I solved this terrible problem for the American people for at least a month. I am a once bitten, twice shy kind of person on this. And I'm not convinced that this isn't just another situation in which essentially Trump's creating a problem so he can then claim that he solved it. So the announcement officially on this is supposed to come tomorrow morning. We will have to see what happens next. Obviously, there is reason to be concerned. And yet, people should be aware, as I said last week when this happened, that there's a pattern here. And it is a narcissistic abuse pattern of creating a problem, facing consequences that will come from that problem. Because I'm going to tell you right now, the American Institute of Architecture, for instance, this morning issued a scathing letter about what it's going to do to the American construction industry if these tariffs are put into place. Business is already speaking up about this. All right. But I want to remind you, consequences come and then they're like, ooh, better solve that problem. Look at me. I'm so special. I solved this terrible problem that was happening. Rinse and repeat. Okay. So let's be a little bit cautious here at this point about the outcome of this, the likely outcome of this, and we'll see what happens next. Okay. Someone asked me a question about voting systems and the future. Okay. So I have to say something about just generally right now. Doomerism, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. This is again from Anna Gifty, who many of you know is a great writer and Harvard teacher right now, who has said doomerism is not an organizing strategy. And I'm going to tell you, I got no patience for that right now. I got no patience for people who are like, we're not going to have another election. Really? Because that's kind of up to us. That's up to us. That's not up to Donald Trump. That's up to us. So this thing of, it's we're all effed, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. I'm over that moment right now. Okay. Because there is an enormous amount of power in the people, right? And telling people it's all over, there's not going to be another election is actually doing the work of fascism for it. Okay. We have an election scheduled right now in about 18 months. We have midterm elections where we could take back the House and the Senate. And there will be an enormous amount of mobilizing work to do in that event. And I have to tell you, this is another reason to get involved locally where you live right now, because mobilizing just for elections is part of what got us here. We have to be mobilizing for survival constantly. And elections are a part of that, but they're not the whole game. All right. All that said, we have no idea what Trump's going to try to pull in advance of the midterms. Okay. We also have a number of state elections that are happening between now and then that are really important. We have 3 seats up in the House right now. Yes, from very deeply gerrymandered Republican districts. But if by some miraculous stance those went Democratic, we would be able to take back the House. So all hope is not lost. Okay. And one of the things that I want to caution against here generally, that I've cautioned against a lot since November, is this thing of imagining the next worst possible thing that could happen. Okay. Reality is currently really rough. It is also currently bad enough. I hate to put it in those terms, but it's true. And we don't need to spend our time worrying that somehow they're going to magically end the election cycle. Okay. If and when there are signals that relate to that, that seem to indicate that that's something that's coming, that will be dealt with. It will be dealt with legally. It will be dealt with in the streets. It will be dealt with from a public advocacy standpoint in terms of people calling the House and the Senate. Okay. None of this at this point is actually like over. And I think anybody who's telling you it's over is lying to you. They're lying to you. And that may be because they don't have the capacity to process what's happening in real time in a way that actually sees the full lay of the land. Like, I'm not going to blame people for that if that's the emotional response, but it's not the truth and it's not reality. Okay. There's a long way to go between here and there. And a lot of that has to do with us. Okay. So on that front, I have to remind you that there are nominations that are still pending in the Senate. And there's also a real opportunity right now on the Hill to take advantage of what's happening from the standpoint, particularly of those of you who are blue dots in red states. And so, like, this is your invitation right now, okay? Because one of the things that we know gets calls kind of like instantly dismissed if you happen to be calling a MAGA senator or a MAGA representative, or even just someone who's kind of like your standard conservative, even though like they're all really MAGA right now. One of the things that's being neglected is that there is a messaging strategy right now that's actually really effective. You don't need to call your MAGA senator and complain about how Trump's deporting people. It's awful. Don't get me wrong. But if you really want to have an impact right now, your messaging strategy has to be something like this. Hi, I'm calling you because I'm your constituent, and they're going to ask you for your zip code. Give it. One of the things that I just wanted to let you know that I'm like very, very upset right now about what Elon Musk is doing. Because I didn't vote for Elon Musk. Nobody in our state voted for Elon Musk. And I'm worried about my Social Security benefits or my Medicare benefits or the Medicaid that my child relies on or the Medicaid that goes to my sister who's on disability. What are you going to do about Elon Musk? Because nobody voted for him. What's your plan? Now, I'm going to say something about this. That's a totally nonpartisan talking point. You can make that phone call if you are a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a Bernie bro, doesn't even matter. It's totally irrelevant to the way that you're talking to the person that you're calling. Okay. The point here is that the red senators and congresspeople need to know that their constituents are really upset about what Elon is doing. Because it's outside the bounds of anything having to do with like partisan politics, right? We literally have a tech bro invading the federal government and stealing our data. We have a tech bro deciding outside the scope of congressional authority to shut down whole agencies. What do they plan to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Nobody voted for him. And I think that that kind of messaging is really key. And, you know, you can make it really personal. We have a bunch of people who watch this broadcast who are on Social Security. Tell them that. I'm on Social Security and I'm really afraid that I'm going to become unhoused if I don't get my checks. Elon Musk is saying that he's going to ignore Social Security accounts. On what basis? I'm terrified. What are you going to do about it? Right? Tell your story. Tell the story of people that you know and love. Okay? This is really critical because the fact of the matter is that we're a few people away from this whole situation tipping. And if it tips in a direction where pressure is put on Trump because of what Elon is doing, this whole situation could change overnight. So it's very, very important to make your voice heard right now, okay? And I would just recommend to everybody, honestly, that you like focus right now on Elon and the Nazi Youth Brigade. Don't call them that in the calls. Be polite, okay? But it's really important that you call and are like, nobody elected this guy. What do you plan to do about it? I'm scared. People I love are scared. What are you going to do about it? You're supposed to be representing me. What's your plan? Okay. That kind of messaging is much more likely to have an impact than calling and being like, why don't you change your mind on abortion rights? Much as I wish it was that easy. Okay. So that is my recommendation right now in terms of where to start. And as always, I think you guys should be like calling every day. And if you can't get through on the DC number, call the local offices. Critical right now. Critical. And if you know, like, let's just say hypothetically you're in Connecticut and Senator Murphy is your senator or Senator Blumenthal, call them and thank them. Call them and thank them for what they're doing. Tell them that you need more people like them standing up. Are they trying to get other senators to help them in their efforts to shut down these nominations? What's the plan of the party as a whole? What's the DSCC going to do about it? Right? Ask questions about like what they're planning to do, that you want to know what their plan is. Okay. Super important. Super important. Okay. Final topic for today is the Super Bowl. So we all know that Trump was there with Ivanka, randomly saluting during the national anthem. And that I will tell you, I'm not an NFL person. Anybody who's watched here for a very long time knows I have very strong feelings about the NFL because of CTE and domestic violence and all sorts of other things. But I wanted to see what Kendrick Lamar did. And so I'm just going to point something out. All right. Kendrick Lamar said the revolution will be televised. That was where he started. Okay. And he went from there to have like incredible imagery of like a divided America, a flag like literally split in two with him at the center. Okay. He went on to make a whole bunch of points that if you were paying attention were about Trump, like turn off his TV, right? It was a really revolutionary moment. And I know there are people who were like, I wanted him to say F Trump. Well, apparently he did that at a concert the night before in New Orleans, had everybody in the room chanting it. Okay. But all that said, this was a really important moment because people needed it, right? They needed a creative and artistic moment where essentially the message was, we're not rolling over for this, right? Let's watch what we've got here now. Like, here's the message that we're sending to you. And that's on top of everything he did in relation to Drake, which was like insane. That was fun, right? Serena Williams dancing on the grave of her ex-boyfriend. That was fun. All right. But all that said, the messaging about this was actually, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. You better be prepared. And I thought it was beautiful. I was really happy about it, honestly. And I think we all deserved it. We needed more of it. That's not to mention the fact that like the Chiefs lost and all of their leadership is MAGA and their kicker is MAGA. And like, it was a good moment. And the Eagles will not go to the White House because they're not down with this. So shout out Philly Burbs girl born, for Philadelphia. It's all good. SZA was also fabulous. Also an ex-girlfriend of Drake. It was like really, really like, you don't want to cross Kendrick Lamar because, like he holds a grudge. So in any event, one of the things I want to mention just in relation to this is that Trump did make this crazy announcement on Friday that he's firing the board of the Kennedy Center, which he doesn't really have the authority to do. That, by the way, includes John Batiste, who did the national anthem yesterday at the Super Bowl. And then he was taking it over. So one of the things I want to remind you all of is that like the Nazis and fascists generally try to shut down art and creativity and make it only be directed toward propaganda. Why? Because of things like this. Because creativity and artistic expression is an opportunity for people to mobilize, right? It inspires people. It makes people feel powerful when it's done in the right way, okay? So don't neglect this thing of like, he's trying to oust the board of the Kennedy Center and put himself in charge of art. Oh my God. Because that actually is designed in many ways to stop what happened last night at the Super Bowl from happening. And we can't allow it to happen. Because just like I've said to you all for the last 8 years, right? There's a role for everyone to play in how we stand up to this. That includes creatives. You guys are more important than you know in many instances, okay? Don't forget that your art, your music, your sculpture, your murals, your creativity, your graphics, your t-shirts, right? All that stuff is a step in the direction of pushing back if it is designed to do that, okay? So, yeah, that's it for today, my friends. If you like what I'm doing here, please click the like button. If you're watching on the replay, drop me a comment and say hello because it tells the algorithm that you like what I'm doing here. Don't forget to subscribe. You can share this with anybody that you would care to. And if you want to support the broadcast financially, because we are viewer supported, no money coming in from anywhere else. You should feel free to join us over at patreon.com/resistancelive. Monthly subscriptions start as low as $5. That's less than 20 cents a broadcast. Or you can click join here and that gets you the live chat and a bunch of other perks like Resistance Live emojis and other fun things. All right. That's it for today, my friends. Oh, I do have a free webinar coming up tomorrow called From Chaos to Connection, Organizing for Impact in Challenging Times. There is a link for that up on it's actually a link for that in the community posts here. So if you go to the community tab or posts on my homepage, you can find the link for that and register. It's at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be an opportunity for us to talk about some basics related to organizing and also to talk about something new that we have coming up. All right. Lots of love, my friends. I will catch you all here tomorrow at regular time. Hang in there. Stay focused. Get off the phone. All right. I'll see you soon. Bye.